Sunday evening ramble, YouTube 84. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I decided that I'm going to slightly steal a teeny bit from a recently deceased YouTube channel that was really great, and I'm gonna miss this guy dearly. His name was Independent Man, if people never watched him. Really quite a good video maker, made some excellent videos. He was an Australian fellow that was probably, I think, in his early 50s, and he understood economics quite well, and he was really good at archiving old video footage. One of the things he would do is he would have something called Lazy Sundays, and he would just upload something old that was non-copyrighted and put it on his channel. And it was cool. So it inspired me to believe that I can steal his format as just a teeny similarity and do something called Sunday Rambles, where instead of actually writing out a whole thing and bothering to do that, I'm just going to pick 3 different subjects a week and kind of ramble about them. And then I'm not allowed to edit at all. So it's for the true fans, man. People who actually just legitimately like me and legitimately like listening to me talk. This is for you. And so, yeah, it really is a shame that Independent Man is gone. Because one of the things that he talked about in regards to economics was housing bubbles. And for me, that's very interesting because I've lived in both San Francisco and Seattle, and I really wanted to hear his take about various different things. One of the things that he theorized, which I think is fascinating, but almost nobody ever really talks about, and I'm really not sure why. I think maybe just because people don't understand it, because it's a lot to really understand, is that he thinks that China has potentially the world's biggest economic bubble in history. Now, I kind of understand how real estate development bubbles sort of work because I guess I'm maybe above average intelligence. I'm not stupid. And when the Occupy protests were happening, that was all about the big bank bailouts of 2007, or the financial collapse of 2007, and then the subsequent big bank bailouts that went on under Obama's watch. A lot of people thought that Obama was not going to bail out the big banks. And then it turned out that he did. And I think that that's what sparked the Occupy protests, because taxpayers were paying for the mistakes of these big banks, and the big banks were colluding directly and offering campaign money and stuff to various different politicians. So it was this system that they described as too big to fail, which means that even if it did fail, then the American taxpayers would have to bail them out and pick up the tab for the mistakes of the gigantic investors that were carelessly giving out money to small-time property developers, assuming that they were always going to get their money back. It's a very long, complicated story. They made a movie about it called The Big Short, which I recommend you watching if you want to kind of get a sense of what happened that led to the 2007 financial collapse. It's a fascinating story. It's a good movie. And I kind of feel like I sort of got it at the end of it. But I'm not like an economics guy. I'm just not. That being said, apparently something similar might be happening in China. A lot of people think that it is. And there's all of these real estate development firms or whatever that are developing not just in China, which they are. There's a lot of places building a whole bunch in China, and they are also building a lot overseas. If you live in some place like Seattle, New York City, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Portland, Oregon, any urban mecca where there's a lot of desirable employment and young people who are fresh out of college, graduate school, or whatever, are moving to get a new job, there's all of this new development, these luxury apartments and condominiums. And much of that money is coming from foreign investors, and the biggest foreign investor is China. Chinese investors believe that American places, especially, but probably also places like Australia, are particularly solid investments because of the fact that the Chinese government has a habit of taxing a lot. They have a long history of being, communists over there. So it's more stable, they believe, to invest in Western nations. And the way that these investment companies tend to work is that they get as many different people to invest in them so that they can keep building. And they say, yeah, we're going to build more and more luxury apartments. We're going to build more and more. We built 5 new ones last year in Seattle alone. So just give us some more money and you're going to be rich. You're going to be rich. However, what they're really doing is they're kind of just taking people's money and continuing to build. And they're not necessarily going to get the return that they're promising. And that's what happened in the United States. We built all of these properties with people's money, this kind of like loaned money. The bank was enabling it, and then there was never an investment return, and the banks collapsed. People theorize that that's happening, but it might be happening with China, not just in China, but overseas. And when that collapses, it could be the biggest economic collapse in human history. I don't know what's going to happen. It might be this like randomly really great thing where every city that happened with, all of the sudden these luxury apartments and condominiums become affordable living spaces. They're actually really horribly made generally. They have all these problems where they're poorly designed, and they will often, this happened to a friend of mine who actually bought a house recently. Her and her husband were moving into a place. It looked nice enough, and the place told her that they should they fed her a person to talk to see if it passed the inspection, to see if it was up to code. And they told her who to talk to exactly. Well, it turns out that the person that they said to talk to is actually crooked, and the place doesn't hold up to scrutiny, and they have to pay for $30,000 worth of repairs, and they're having to go to court to deal with that. So apparently a lot of these condominiums that people are buying are going to have to be repaired in a few years when inevitably the pipes burst or some crap, and the residents are going to have to pay for it themselves. And they were told that they were moving into this brand new awesome building, and it's not so awesome. So Independent Man really knows a lot about this stuff. He probably knows a lot more than I do. And if you found that interesting and you have a direct line with him, I'd love to talk to him now that he's leaving and not wanting to be a professional person that talks to people. But hey, maybe he'll randomly want to do it. I don't know. Okay, the next thing that I was going to talk about is the title of this stream, YouTube 84. And, okay, I'm just going to lay it on you. I've never read 1984. I know it's a thing. My friend, our cat's gay, he gets annoyed. I don't know if annoyed is the right word, but everybody's astounded that I've never read 1984 because it's so relevant to so much of what I do and what I talk about. I've never read it. And I was born in 1982. So, and my father was a computer scientist and worked in the early internet a lot. So I was always hearing about it from people around me. I was a child of the 1984 awakening or something like that, but I've never actually read it. And part of me wants to say that that's just me being annoying and that I totally should have and blah, 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 blah. But then I realized there was actually something more to it and that there's a reason that I haven't read 1984. And the reason is because when people talk about 1984, they get really into coming up with, what's the word? Am I thinking of, metaphoric, simile, analogous, parable, parallel? They relate the current world to 1984 altogether too much in a way that becomes kind of tedious and makes me feel like they are often forgetting to see the current version of reality for what it is, and instead are trying to superimpose the 1984 story onto reality. They're forgetting to see the world simply in terms of objective truths that we can easily observe and note, and instead are trying to say, look, it's like 1984, it's like 1984. And once people do that too much, it feels disingenuous and it's hard to take them completely seriously, and you start kind of tuning them out because you start believing in your head that this is somebody that already had a preconceived notion about what they think is going on, and it's based on some book that they read when they were a teenager back when they were doing a bunch of acid or something. It's what I always think when people start talking about 1984, all, you know, like, man, we're living in 1984, blah, 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 blah. Because I used to hang out with people and do acid, and when I was a teenager, I don't endorse illegal substances on my channel. That's not something that I endorse, but I used to do that when I was a teenager, and I knew people who were in their 20s who would be into that, and they would talk about the internet in 1984 and how the future is today and blah, 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 blah. They were saying that stuff in the 90s. It wasn't nearly as bad as it is now, but they had that. And back in the 90s, I was like, I never even read this book. It's kind of tedious. If the future is today, why don't we just live in today? Now, I'm not saying I shouldn't read the book at all, because I've heard that the dynamic that is set up with the party, and then there's the 3 different factions that are always at war or whatever, it's supposed to be pretty interesting, and maybe I should go ahead and read the book, because maybe there is something observable that I'm missing. But that is the honest, genuine reason that I have never really, really felt compelled to read the book. Oh, sorry, I ate a bunch of food and now I'm kind of burping. Okay, so, yeah, you can talk me out of that as much as you want. You can totally talk me out of that one. Okay, the third thing that I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to close this video out, is cultural appropriation. People keep on bringing up that Chinese dress that the high schooler wore. This one's kind of good because this is the first time there was a viral cultural appropriation story that happened, I believe, maybe after the social justice boom was officially kind of culturally not winning. I mean, we still have the radical communists and everything being violent and whatever, but the general pop cultural social justice stuff is, we can all agree it's on the way out. It's not gone entirely. It's not gone entirely, but it's on the way out. We can the signs are there. It's not quite cool anymore to be all SJWE. So this white girl was dating an Asian guy, I believe actually Chinese, and she put on a traditional Chinese dress. And it's pretty. It's a nice, pretty dress. I don't see why anybody would have a problem with it. And hey, I have Japanese family members, and I've been to Tokyo and some parts of outside of Tokyo. You know, I took a few train rides to see some historic areas where I was really, really glad I learned some Japanese because nobody spoke English and the signs were not in English anymore. And I could tell you, when you actually go over to Japan and you're the minority as a tall white guy who, you know, I'm like 6'2". There's tall people in Japan. People act like they're all going to be like super, super short, and that's not actually true. That's a stereotype. But I still do stand out because I'm about one of the tallest people around. Yes. And I'm white. Nobody would even look at me because they have these stereotypes that Americans are all violent and stuff. And yeah, so people would largely not even look at me. However, the radical cultural appropriation and fetishization of Western culture that is exhibited when you are in places like Shibuya, the Shibuya district. I believe actually Black Pigeon Speaks made a video talking about cultural appropriation and Shibuya. And Shibuya was actually the closest big district to where I was staying. So I spent a lot of time there because they had a lot of cool arcades. Japanese arcades are extremely addictive, by the way. So if you go there, expect to spend $100 just playing like slot machines where you can't actually win any money. So point being, bring it back to cultural appropriation. These people, like Japanese people, Asian people in general, East Asian people, they do a lot of cultural fetishization of other cultures. They imitate Western culture a lot. They have like Western diners and stuff where it's like these absurd places where the waiters dress up as cowboys and they're serving hamburgers that are kind of hamburgers, but they have, you know, wasabi on the side that you dip your fries in and crap like that. It's very strange. And then they will also have, and this is something that my cousin who lived there, he's half Japanese, he took me to this restaurant that like I would have never even known about because in Japan there's a lot of construction that is built upon itself and you have to look up in the air and look at the signs and then go in an elevator and go up a door. It's not like in the United States where most restaurants are on the ground level. There's just a massive amount of stuff that you have to be able to read Japanese pretty well and look at the sign and know to go there. So the place that he took me to was a Chinese restaurant in Japan that was extremely ethnically Chinese in a stereotypical way where the Japanese people who were pretending to be Chinese waiters were making fun of Chinese people. It was really, really weird, really strange. Like, I can't even quite describe it. And I think my cousin gave me alcohol, so I honestly don't even remember it that well because I was like 17 and I didn't drink all that much, but it was so strange. So the way that, you know, Asian people view cultural appropriation is we all know that it's overdone, and when we talk about it in America, it's this absurd thing that, you know, white people care about, or not even just white people, but SJWs, you know, SJW type people care about this thing, even though nobody else does. But here's what I want to leave you with. The reason that people care about this, there is an actual reason that I think that we can isolate, and it's a visceral, you know, it's a logical human feeling that we all experience sometimes, but I think that people feel this extra hard when it comes to something that they can associate with their ethnic lineage or their race, and that is the feeling of ownership of something that you were into first. It's as simple as that. It's like when you were in high school and you were the first kid to be into punk rock or into drum and bass or something like that. And then all of a sudden, some, I don't know, punk rock band ends up becoming big. And, you know, I don't know, like what, 21 Pilots, are they still pretty popular? the last time I checked, it was a few years ago, and they were the most popular band that could be considered punk rockish, I guess, right? You know, those things become popular, and the people that are into it, that are just now getting into it, they're posers, and you want to be mad at them, and you want to say that they're not real fans and that they have no right to be into this thing that you were into first. And it's an irrational feeling, ultimately. Like, you don't have a right to tell people not to appreciate this thing. But you feel that way. You do. It's an instinctual thing. Like, somehow you started defining yourself in a bracket, and maybe it was just you and your friend or a few other friends, or maybe it was the people who went to those shows. Maybe you went to punk rock shows and nobody else in your high school did, and you would go to these punk rock shows and there'd really only be about 50 people there, but you felt like all those 50 people were cooler than everybody at your whole high school, and it was awesome. And then next year at high school, everybody else is into it too, and the magic is over. Well, I feel like for ethnic and racial minorities, when they look at somebody who is kind of doing that, but they're doing that to something about that they immediately can associate with their personhood as an ethnic or racial minority, like, say, dreadlock hair, it probably is that same type of feeling. And it's also probably really annoying when for somebody to look not as if they're mocking, because I don't think that that's what they legitimately feel. That's what they'll say, but I don't think anybody feels that when a white person has dreadlocks that they're mocking dreadlocks. I don't think that that's what it is. But I do think that if I was a black person and I looked at a white person with dreadlocks, I would be suspicious, and I would think, does this person think that they can now blend into black culture and go unnoticed? Do they think that they're a part of my club now and that they're going to be accepted with open arms? Because that would be rather naive of any black person to just go ahead and accept white people for getting a certain hairstyle. And the fact that they would think that we would be so naive as to just simply accept them because they, like when Homer Simpson, there was a episode of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson wore a Rastafarian hat to Lollapalooza, and they all called him a narc. The reason why they were saying that is because Homer Simpson was trying to look as if he was a Jamaican Rastafari type guy, and they assumed that that meant he was an undercover police officer. I feel like there might be a little bit of, not necessarily the criminal, the undercover cop aspect of it, but just the notion that when you're a racial minority, it does kind of look like a white person might be being a tourist for their own amusement, hoping that you'll accept them and that they'll get a little piece of whatever unique fun might be going on within your own minority community at that given moment. And that nobody's going to say, hey, white guy, you're not actually a part of this. You don't actually just get to dress up like this and go to the hip hop show and expect to be embraced with open arms. And I think that that's kind of all it is. Like, it's that feeling. That's just a feeling. And then, of course, people, go to universities based on what are likely often affirmative action scholarships and they decide to make an academic career around those feelings. And then there's theses written about that feeling, and that becomes cultural appropriation, and people act like it's a much bigger deal than it ever really was. But it doesn't mean that there's not some truth to the notion of cultural appropriation being, kind of annoying. In the same way where, I'm a gay guy, and when straight people start doing things that were previously things that we could safely call gay culture, and there's several things that are like that, like house and disco music has historically been largely a gay guy thing, and then all of a sudden straight dudes are acting like they know more about it than gay guys, and that it's a weird, that's a really, really long story. I don't like getting into talking about DJ stuff, but that happens all the time. They start, when straight guys get a hold of house music, the first thing to go is everything gay about it, and then everything that makes it house, and then it's just oonts, 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 oonts. The diva vocals, the horns, the weird little beep, 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 like all that stuff it goes away, and it just becomes this like very bland thing. And that is, it gets very disappointing. But I'm not sure, am I annoyed because the music got boring, or am I annoyed because all of a sudden this thing that I used to only hear at underground gay nights where I had to really actively search for them is now the same music that really, really average straight people are listening to at really, really big clubs. People that I knew in high school are listening to this music that I was listening to 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm having that same kind of high school reaction where I'm like, man, you're a poser. That used to be my thing. Except for it's not dreadlocks. Okay, that's all for the Sunday ramble. Tell me if you enjoyed it, and definitely tell me if you didn't enjoy it, because I've never done this before. Maybe I'll never do it again. Bye.